Thanks a lot for joining our show again. And this time, this is not about your story anymore. Okay, so as I share with you, is Vivian and I we have been in the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, and actually, we are working on a book about that also, Bassem, and it's the first time that she and I working on the book together, so we're excited. And the reason that we pick this topic of thinking is because we believe that our ability to think these days is diminishing, so it's not improving at all. And every chance that we talk to leader like you, expert like you, and who involve a lot of works in thinking, and you've been involved with a lot of people who are deep thinker, who their works require them to think a lot and to take actions, right? So we want to have this conversation and to discuss about thinking and pick your secrets on how you've been helping yourself to grow your thinking capability over the years. And so that
Sounds good.
stories we put on the book, and then we also will share that with the audience. So if anyone that want to improve their ability to think, they can hear your stories and reflect on that and learn something so that they can change and adapt to the new way of thinking. All right.
Yeah, no, when I got your message about it, you hit a nice note, on the thinking side because I agree with you. I think like maybe the line is breaking. So if I feel like you guys have frozen, I'll stop talking so that nothing is missed out. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I feel like it's freezing for a second. Maybe my internet or your side, I don't know. It doesn't matter. So I was just thinking. I was just saying about thinking is that yes, we have not been giving enough attention to thinking. We're inundated with so many things that we feel we don't need to think. We can just get the answer that we want by, looking at our phone or talking to somebody, or, mostly the phone is, I think, the main reason why we don't think, because in a way, you don't even need to sit back and say, let me think about it, because if you have a question in your mind, usually you just let me Google it. What do you do this? How do you answer this? And then you take. We're kind of becoming because most of the Google answers are either a majority. So you see 3-4 answers that are similar. You think this is the right thing. Doesn't mean it's the right thing. You don't.
Yeah. We lost you for
But
one
not
second.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped talking when you lost me. When I see that you guys are frozen, I'm stopping. So this is gonna be the funniest recording ever. Yeah. So yeah, it's when I was gonna say. So maybe it was the right thing for that context, or maybe for these people in their situation, but it doesn't mean that it's always the right. Obviously, it's good to learn from others' experiences and see how people handle a certain situation. But each one is unique. The personalities are unique. You are unique as a person. And if you don't take this into account and you give it a bit of thought, sometimes I think you miss out on lots of opportunities that you might otherwise have had. So yeah, thinking, great subject to talk about. Happy to answer your questions if you have questions. You want me to just keep talking, I'll keep talking, but I'd rather that you ask me questions.
I We would love to have a conversation by asking you questions also. So Vivian, would you want to start with question first or?
I think you emphasize a very, very common feeling that people try to Google the questions by asking AI or the statistic answer, how they're going to get from there without spending time to think. So I guess my questions to you is, if time is the matter, is a critical factor, how do we put aside some time to think? Like if Googling it would be the faster, so we feel like we are smart, we are fast, we are prompt, and we are taking the majority solution and make it more, a general guideline for everybody to facilitate that kind of thinking. How would you respond to staff if they keep thinking about using the phone or Googling that to answer the thinking that everybody should have known by just reading the Google. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, time is definitely a major factor in people giving time to thinking. Now, let me just start by saying there's nothing wrong with Googling stuff and finding out what's happening in the outside world. That's definitely something you should do, but it should not replace thinking. And what my issue is not with the fact that people are Googling things. My issue is that people take it, they don't question, they don't challenge. They just take things, it shows the majority are the people who are saying this, so they say this is how it is. There isn't pushing back a little bit, let's say, on the idea, or try to think, does it make sense? Does it make sense in my own situation? Does it make sense at this time, that we're talking about? When I mean this time, maybe this was a question answered on Google 3 years ago. Maybe today it's not relevant anymore, or maybe it's in a different culture. So it's in a Chinese culture versus a Middle Eastern culture. Maybe things are different. So I'm not. It's one of the tools that we're trying to find answers. It's one of the tools that we're trying to find answers, but it's not a replacement for thinking. It's a tool to give you answers. Now the answers guide you in a certain direction. So you look at the answer and say, okay, maybe I should be thinking along these lines, or maybe I should, put bullet points, or maybe I should take into account, do a SWOT analysis. It gives you a trigger to start thinking, but it should not replace the thinking. And this is where I think people sometimes, go wrong. Sometimes I do it, so I'm not going to pretend I'm the greatest thinker, in the whole time, because sometimes, like you said, time is a factor. Now, I just want to go back to this, how do people allocate time? And I think it all goes back to being a little bit organized and having some structure in your day. And if you have structure, for everything you do, so, whether it's eating, exercise, working, family time. Okay, now I'm back. If there is a big if there's a bigger picture of structure, and you look at it, and you usually fit in a day's time certain supposedly priorities, that you should be doing on that day. The question is, why aren't we giving thinking the priority that it deserves? Because it doesn't have to be hours and hours. It just needs it needs some time to allocate for thinking, and it could be multiple. It could be thinking in chunks of 10 minutes, or it could be that you need half an hour to think about something. But look at companies today. I mean, I'm just talking from experience here. We are so busy with meetings that I found that I don't have time to think about the meeting before I go to the meeting to talk about it. I'm finding myself having to wing it sometimes in the meeting, or sometimes after the meeting you're supposed to take some action and think about them. But again, if you're always accepting meetings, the culture in the company is that meetings are important and everybody feels that they need to be in every meeting and all this, then really you're not giving yourself time. So time is very important, but I believe we need to prioritize thinking as section of the day that we give it. Work with what you have, give yourself some time, but think, because it's important.
And Bassem, basically, God gave us the eyes first to see, and not a lot of people will be able to observe good things around them, or they observe different things. You see different things than I see, even if we see the same, directions, right? So thinking was not taught in any school also. And I need to go back to the very basics of that, like in the definition of thinking. I want to pick your brain on that, Bassem. What is the thinking define to you?
It's a good question. I think I'm starting with I think. For me, thinking is when you in your mind take a subject or an issue or something like this and start to look at it. I mean, there are different kind of thinking, right? So that we can't say thinking is one kind. So there is thinking that you're thinking about a problem, or you're thinking about a situation, you're thinking about how you feel, you're thinking about how to find agreement, you're thinking about how to find disagreement. So I don't have personal like definition of thinking as a tool, as one thing, but it's the thought of looking at something, or looking not necessarily with your eyes, but looking at it with your brain, and trying to, or a situation, and trying to analyze it, try to see different sides to it, and try to reach somewhere with this thinking. Now, I just have to say, there is a lot of thinking that happens in our heads that isn't good thinking, which is, when we are overthinking. And, overthinking, or again, it's not being able to differentiate between thoughts that are intentional or thoughts that keep coming to your mind without you being aware. So sometimes you'll be sitting and you want to relax and watch a movie or read a book, and while you're reading the book, a thought comes to your mind, and then this thought distracts you. Oh, I didn't do my essay for or my report, and then you start thinking, oh, well, this is what happened. And then all of a sudden you're going into a different direction. Is this good thinking? You're spending time on thinking. I don't think it's good thinking, because it's not intentional. It came to you and it distracted you, and probably it wasn't the right kind of thinking. Intentional thinking is probably where you can find value. Don't know if I answered your question.
Very good answer, though. Intentional thinking, and it's. I think that the concept of intention is widely applied in the army, right? When they say that I'm intended to do this, I'm intended to do that, instead of like the boss give directions for the people, so it forced the people to think a lot during the process before they propose something. And with that being said, you mentioned one thing earlier, is that we think a lot in our head, and a lot of us use our head to thinking. But in our research, after we talk to a lot of people and asking them how they process and improve their ability to think, a very big portion of them also answer this question, like they let the hearts lead their thinking also, Bassem. So they let the hearts, like their hearts in here, to lead them to to give a different answer to what the head was saying. And so we want to hear your opinion on that. In your line of work, have you how would you let your heart lead your thinking and make a decision?
I mean, it's a good way to describe it, the heart lead your thinking, but some people call it the gut feel, or how do you feel, how does your gut feel about it? And I heard once, I was listening to a podcast, and they described this gut feel is recognized patterns of behavior over time. So the more experience you have, the more probably you have a gut feel for things that are really not noticeable. I'm not sure if I'm describing it correctly, so I'm not a scientist, but the way they were describing it is that, let's say, for example, you meet somebody, and they introduce themselves and everything, and you talk to them, and then when you leave, you don't feel good about this person, or you don't feel like you can trust them, or you don't feel like you can do business with them. Or it could be the other way completely. It will be, oh, I really like this person, and you don't know why, you just met them. And apparently there are things that we notice with our subconscious that we don't think about, that are repetitive patterns or trends of things that we've seen before in people that we liked, for example, or people that we disliked. And it could be as small as eye contact, or it could be the way they walk, or the way they hold their head, or the way they smile, whatever. I don't know what it is, but this is what apparently drives your gut feel. So there is this. So my point was that there is a lot of experience, let's say, that helps the heart. We think it's the heart, but probably it's the experience. And I definitely use my gut feel when I make decisions at work. When I was in corporate, and even in my daily life, I fully agree with the people that you've spoken to, the heart leading the thinking is important. So there is the logical side, which is the brain, let's say, and you start saying, pluses and minuses, pros and cons, and and there are systems and tables to fill if you want to be thinking about something so that you don't miss out on something. But at the end of the day, all this is one thing, but then how do you feel about it? Because how you feel about it, this whole thing. So you want to buy a house. You look at it, it has the same number of rooms that I like. It's in the neighborhood that I like. It's this, it's that, So you start counting the stuff that is the logical thinking, the things that you have put a list that should be met before you make a decision or something. But then you walk into the house and you see it and stuff, and I don't feel good about it. And you don't get it. It has all the logical things. So your heart led somehow. So yeah, I think you should pay attention to both. But being aware, being intentional, I think is important. Be aware, what stopped me from making that decision. Is it a logical thing or the hard thing? If it's the hard thing, try to find out what it is. And if you can't put your finger on it, fine, you can move on. But it's difficult. It's not easy to say when you like or you don't like somebody. You start justifying your gut feel. But if it's a gut feel, how can you justify it? It's you don't know why you like the person, or you didn't like it, or you didn't like this house. Worth researching a bit, maybe for the book, to look at. I think it's an important one.
I chose the easy part in the book by sharing the stories because but then Vivian is the one who do all the research and design behind it, so that she needs to come up with that reasons why people believe in the gut feeling. And go back to your sharing, Bassem. You say that you use it a lot in your works also, definitely from time to time, right? And then you say it's also a practice that we could practice so that we can listen to the heart and let the heart to lead the thinking better. So what kind of practice that we need to do and learn now so that we can confidently let the heart and the gut tell us what to think?
Okay, I mean, for me, what helped me a lot in my thinking, and I think you need to be aware. I think self-awareness is very important. And I think a lot of people lack self-awareness, lack the kind of impact they have on others and on themselves by doing certain things. So you need to be self-aware. One way of becoming self-aware, for me, it started when I was in COVID in Hong Kong, is I started meditation. I started to meditate regularly. I mean, it started like 3-4 times a week, and then it became daily, and now I'm off and on. But it really was very helpful. It's I find this whole idea of focusing on the breath, for example, or on a candle or whatever, and it's not stopping the thoughts from coming. It's letting them pass and not distracting you and being, how when you're talking to somebody and all of a sudden you delve into another subject and then you say, how did we get here? And then you need to go back to how you were talking. This is but within you are trying to focus on the breath, and all of a sudden you find yourself thinking about the planning for this evening, or how you were upset with your partner, or how you shouted at your kid, whatever, and you go into your own pattern that takes you away from what you're focusing on. And the trick for me, what I found, and I think meditation works differently for each person, but for me, the learning was recognizing that there is something that's distracting you and coming back to what you need to focus on. And if you do this enough, you become good at it, even when you're awake and you're not meditating, or when you're just doing stuff. You realize that you're getting distracted, and then you bring back yourself to now. What am I doing now? So for me, meditation helped in the self-awareness. I started recognizing what takes my mind, what distracts me, and then you start to get to know yourself a little bit better. And I'm still far, from being a very good meditator, to become even better at this. But I'm giving an example of one way of being able to do it. So mindfulness or presence in the moment, and finding, how and then you start trusting that, so I think with time you start trusting that gut feeling. Going back to experiences and finding out, but I think how you feel about a thought is very important. Of course, if there should be a combination of logic and heart. It shouldn't be just one or the other. It cannot be, logically, if I throw myself from the balcony, I'll die, but I feel.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so it has to make sense, right?
Yep, it has to make sense, right? Otherwise, if we let the heart lead the way, that will lead to a lot of sad story about love at first sight, always. So
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. Yeah. With
Vivian?
love, yes. Tell me, Vivian.
I think you put it to a very important point. We were thinking about the N, the letter N is nourishment, is how do you nourish and keep your thinking alive. So if we imagine thinking is something that we need to keep it cleansed, meditation is helping it to avoid all the noises. And then we're looking at how we gonna fuel that thinking, the energy to keep us continue thinking and driving it. So in your practice, what would you use food for thought?
I mean, it's because we're used to having answers quickly from Google and stuff like this. You don't give time to think about something. So I would say, besides the meditation and the clarity of mind that you get from it, is actually saying to yourself, I am thinking about, let's say I'm thinking about this interview. I want to think about it. I want to think beforehand, and I want, and what. I frozen. Frozen or
We are back.
moving now?
We are back.
Okay.
We're back. We're back. No, but Vivian is coming back before you now. It used to be both of you at the same time. Now one after the other, so I have to watch both of you. Yeah. So, so yeah, it's it's given it time and given it enough attention to go through it, and I think it's this idea of challenging and pushing back. Why? The question why. Yeah, the kids ask you all the time, when you say, you have to clean your teeth. Why? Because they have to be healthy. Why? Because, if you're not healthy, why? Kids have this annoying, maybe why. But if you actually ask about something, why, how come, what is another way of doing it? And, who said this is the only way? And, who is this person who said this is the way? Let me see if they're credible or not. And because the worst thing is that this is how we've always done it, even in companies. If you want to talk about the impact of thinking on the company and corporate performance and people inside, one of the biggest things you hear is that this is how it's always been done. So what? Okay, let's change it. It's not like given that this is how the only way that it's been done. Maybe it has always been done, but let's think about something new. Now, it might not work, or it might not be as good as the outs, but at least give it that that challenge at least.
Wow.
And I find this very important.
Wow. Bassem, thanks a lot for bringing that one up, because when Vivian and I try to categorize the answer onto into groups, right? We start to see the pattern that break exactly onto the word thinking. Like acronym of thinking is T is represent for time, so you have to put time onto it, right? The H is represent for the heart, and the heart where you have to let both that, like you say, both of the head and the heart to jointly to make a decision and join forcing the thinking process. The first I is the one that you mentioned before, is intentional. So you have to have the intention to think. And the N was the knowledge. The knowledge, which means that we have to absorb information from here and there, and challenge the knowledge from Google, like you say, and then asking the different questions so that you're gonna be able to bring the new information in and verify that, right? and then go to the K. No, the N was
No, K was knowledge,
when
I think.
the
N
K was the knowledge.
nutrition or
Nourishment.
Nourishment, yes. The I
nourishment.
was the
Yeah,
I
K
was
was
the one that
knowledge.
you just mentioned. The I was the one you just mentioned. Is imagination. So like challenge the status quo and imagine what else out there that we need to be, like absorbing here, and then what else that we need, who else we need to bring into the process so that it can help us to think differently, think better. And for the organizations that you've been servicing, is huge, innovative in that process. A lot of people you've been working with are really innovative people that are thinking very creatively, right? So, is there anything that they've been doing that you think that can help them to be thinking creatively and innovatively like that?
Uh, I think the creative thinking is the thinking that doesn't have a limit, and the thinking that doesn't have failing as a feared outcome.
Mm,
To be creative, you need to be willing to fail.
mm,
You need to be,
no limits.
not to discard anything off the table. It's almost like when you start like throwing ideas that are almost crazy. Because I think like when you talk about ideas, like you want something to to be completely new, you start putting crazy ideas on the table, almost, and then if you push it so much, you can end up with something that is not as where you were today, but not as crazy as the idea that you threw, that somewhere in the middle that can work. And so the creativity comes from the low limit, no fear of failure, and probably more importantly is the ability to observe and listen, because a lot of creative things are not really that new. It's just taking on something else and making it different or making it better, or observing something in nature or in people or whatever, and say, oh, how can this apply to my problem? How can I take this idea and make it and make it in breaking a lot. Did you miss what I said, or I don't know?
I heard into the observe and listen.
Yeah, so observe and listen, because you might find something that could be very relevant to an industry or to a certain discipline or whatever, that could be also applicable to your own, if you are open-minded enough to see how you can apply it to your own business. And I've seen I can't recall a lot of the examples, but I've seen people who have taken ideas from medical stuff and applied them to business, or from space, and it's just being open and not to limit yourself to your own environment. So if you're in the corporate FMCG, for example, you shouldn't just be following everything that's happening in FMCG. Look at technology, look at other things, and be open-minded. That's, I would say, so to repeat, just in case I was frozen at some point, it's one is to be limitless and open-ended thinking, no fear of failure, and listen and observe. I would say these are the key elements of creative thinking.
Thanks a lot for sharing that.
Maybe I missed something.
You mentioned about observe and listen, right? And those are basic skills, but not a lot of us will be able to observe and listen well also, Bassem. So if we want to build our imagination into the thinking, and starting by being a good listener and good observer, right? Where should we start?
What do you mean by where should we start?
How can I start to observe better, listen better?
Yeah, I think it goes to intentions. You need to be intentional about it and to be aware of your listening and observing. And everything is tied together. Everything we're talking about is tied together. We go back to meditation and mindfulness and being present in the moment. If you're not aware, if you're not present because your mind is wandering and think about something else, or so somebody's talking to you and your mind is thinking about what to say about your point. You're not in the moment. You're thinking about your point, so you're not listening. Although you pretend you're listening and you're not, interrupting them, you're not really listening because you're thinking about what you want to say, and then you talk about something else. Observing, I'm going to say something controversial here, but these days, with everything that is taking place around the world about being politically correct, people are even worried about observing and making opinion, because if you observe something and you say it, so that you think about it, somebody might say, "Oh, that's not the right thing to say. You can't say that. You cannot say, you cannot see it. You cannot be judgmental. You cannot do this. You cannot do that." So I think again, as a person, you need to be confident enough to observe and have a thought, because today, there are so many things that are happening in this world, and I'm not saying they are wrong. I'm just saying how people go about them could be a little bit extreme, and if we try to be less extreme in how we handle things, maybe the world will be a better place. But we have, let's say, environment. You can observe something and have an opinion that is probably different than what most people are talking about the environment. But you most likely you'll be worried about saying it because you will not be politically correct. You don't care about the environment. I'm not saying, I'm giving one example. I'm not saying this is always the case. It could be about human rights. It could be about body figure. It could be about also, you can have an observation, but are you allowing yourself the thinking, the challenging? Is everything that is being said now because it's politically correct, right? Or do I need time to challenge it? And maybe it is right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying we tend to worry about thinking about it because it has been established that this is how it should be.
Got it. And Bassem, we in the G, the last words in the thinking, right? And we found that it's very fascinating. Yeah, and it go back to our first conversation also. This generosity. You were so generous to join our show. You didn't even know me, and then you agreed to join and share your stories. And that generosity seems across the board is the answer to many people how they help themselves to improve their ability to think. And I want to pick your brain on that. How would you think generosity, giving, gonna help somebody to improve their ability to think, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think the moment you say generosity, the first thing that comes to my mind is others, rather than me. So that's the first point. So I'm generous towards other people. I'm generous towards, and generosity comes usually from somebody who doesn't see resources as finite. It can be coming in. So my time, if I join your show, it's not because you've taken away from my time. It's actually because I'm sharing with you and you're sharing. Because every time I talk to you, I'm benefiting probably more than you're benefiting from me because I'm learning something. So it's not about just me sharing. It's a give and take. So that alone, that exchange of give and take, is nourishment to go to the end, for thinking, because you're talking and you're giving yourself to. You're coming from a place of compassion when you're generous. You're caring about others, and when you're coming from a place of compassion, it means you care about others, and most likely you're observing them, you're listening to what they have to say, and then you're acting on it. So again, I feel I love this giving the thinking letters meaning, because I think it's it's very a nice way to put it together, because I actually believe that everything falls back together anyway. So if we talk about everything we talked about today, from being intentional to giving it time to, they're all interlinked. It's very difficult to be able to to be generous if you're not self-aware, and you will not have the intention if you're not, giving time to listen and stuff like this. So for me, it's really interesting that the way you've put it together in terms of letters, but connected, and you need to do all of them.
Thanks for sharing that. Actually, I think I also learned a lot from you. So you're not gonna learn more than I learned from you. I'm just kidding, Bassem. I was teasing you for this, and thanks for so generous to join our program. Really, I really appreciate that. And the last time that we joined, there was a lot of people in your network, and then came to me and asked me, "How do we know each other?" And I say, "I didn't know you. I didn't know you before. We just happened to know on the internet, and then we're able to connect." And
Sorry. I lost you. I didn't hear what you said. Sorry, you said the first time I joined, and then I lost everything you said.
a
Sorry.
lot of your colleagues around the world asked me, like, how did you know Bassem and then stuff, and I say I didn't know him. He was so generous and so kind to agree to join my show and share his stories. and
Yeah,
yeah,
it was very nice.
yeah, it was very nice though. And go back to the generosity a little bit, because um, a lot of people will hold their ideas dearly to themselves. They're afraid of sharing the ideas, afraid that people will steal on that ideas and stuff like that. And if we know generosity, if you share, and then you're gonna get a lot more feedbacks, a lot more that gonna help you to grow from that idea to the next level. How can we help the people to be confidently and be generous to the giving side of the equations, and share the ideas more openly, Bassem?
Yeah, you're right about people holding, but if you look about I don't know if I'm frozen. It's freezing more now.
It's back.
I'm saying if you look at all the successful people, it's mostly by sharing, right? If you look at the authors and keynote speakers and all this, what are they doing? They're actually sharing their secrets for people to benefit from them. Is everybody who's listening to their speech as successful as them because they took their ideas? No, they are the ones because they have put their own selves into it. They took action on it and they shared it, and this generosity helped them to become successful. Other people become successful in other ways. So I think leading by example is very important in the generosity side, and people seeing how generous you are in your daily life, and then seeing how successful they can say, look, generous and successful can go together. So I think leading by examples, and whenever there is a chance to mention it, like for example in your book mentioning the G stands for generosity, it's a good reminder for people to to remember that can that can help you be successful. So leading by example and keep connecting it to everything else. I would say these are the ones. Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Vivian, you have any other questions?
Yeah, it's a lot of learning for me, and I think I like the idea of compassion to care for the other, because sometimes if we just very generally saying thinking, it can lead to negative thinking, or not really into the good side of it. So I think it's also need to emphasize that thinking lead to a better cause, a better thing to apply. Yeah.
Yeah. And compassion doesn't mean just being nice and all this. Actually, compassion is telling people, you should be stopping this and doing this instead. And compassion is the care. It's not just oh, you don't know what's wrong with them, just leave them. It's you need the love of a parent, right? The compassion is when they love you like unconditionally, but at the same time guide you and discipline you and stuff like this. So for me, compassion is not necessarily only the touchy-feely kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
I have two last questions for tonight. Okay, so I
Okay.
always end up the conversation with two last questions. I don't know why. One is too short, but three is too many. So let's make it two. All right. And Bassem,
Okay.
since we talk about thinking, I want you to rewind your life, all right, from the beginning of your life up until this point. How thinking have been helping you to be successful and do the job that you do right now? How has that contribute?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wasn't always somebody who gave enough time to thinking. There were, I would say, events or milestones that happened that required more thinking than usual, and you do them. Um, Sometimes because you have to. You're put in a situation where you have to think, and you just find that it works for you, and then you start giving it more time. Reading has helped my thinking a lot, because reading books rather than reading screens, if you can, because it's you go back to it, you can think about it, you can challenge it. Having I think one of the things that I wish I hadn't done it, but I've been always interested and helped me, was anything related to debate, because
Debate.
debating and discussing, I think is very important, because you have to prepare for it, and you have to listen to the other person. You have to articulate your own way of thinking against the other person. So I think debating is another one. One that I don't do enough of, but I wish I had. So again, I'm giving you, when I'm rewinding, the good and the bad, the stuff I've done and the stuff I wish I had done. I'm advising my kids to do it. I'm advising, my is to write.
Right.
Because when you're writing is a very good way. Even if you write your journal every day, or if you write, writing requires you to think a bit deeper than just talking, because you have to make sure it's written, that it gets the point across and all that. So I wish I'd done more than that. So I would say writing would have been a good way. So, but yeah, definitely thinking about which job to take, thinking about the position, the promotion, the location, the problems that I've resolved in my jobs. So thinking has been critical to my success over the years, definitely.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
So,
Thanks for sharing that. So writing, debating, put the time to, don't let the event to happen, but to think about that also, and a lot of readings. So that I note in here. And the last thing that I would like to ask you for today, and this is supposed to be the question from Vivian, but I'll help her. All right. So thinking is just a part of the change process, and the whole change process happen also involved in the doings. Okay. But we believe that if we think right, then the doing is gonna be easier. And so we want to ask you, from the thinking process and then make it to the doings, how did you do that to make sure that the execution is smooth and excellent, things like that?
yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Yeah, too much thinking and no doing, there's no point, right?
Yeah.
It's you're thinking to get something executed. So definitely, um, but I think part of the thinking is think how to execute. So you come up with an idea, you come up with something, but you should allocate time of how to execute it. This is sometimes very much like overlooked somehow. That we're going to go ahead and do it, but you need to plan the execution and track it. So this is how I plan to do it, and then you need to track on as you go if you are executing properly. So I'd rather be somebody who does things rather than think if I have to choose between one, because thinking without doing, at least without thinking, you'll end up doing something. But if you just think and you don't do anything, so what? So it shouldn't be one or the other. We're mostly doers in life. Most of us go to the office and do things, and even if you're in the daytime and stuff. What I think is we should give more time to thinking but allocate, especially if there is action to be taken during the thinking, how I'm going to execute. But becoming a great thinker and not any doing is also useless somehow. I mean, unless you're a philosopher or something that you have to just give ideas and people will do them. But I think people will be more likely to follow what you do if they've seen it in action, if they've seen that what you thought about is being done. So from that point of view, definitely doing is something that you need to think about.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. So there is a part of the thinking we have to reserve for the doing, so that we can plan and track and have a system in place to help us with the with the execution part, right? Otherwise, the thinking itself will lack the transition onto the doing itself also.
Yeah, I mean, as in companies, you might have people who come up with ideas and then people who think about how to execute the ideas. That's fine, as long as somebody thinking about the execution. Some people are very good at coming up with ideas, but they're not very good at execution or even thinking about execution. But at least they're giving some, high-level thinking, high-level ideas. Somebody takes it and say, okay, that's a great idea. Now, how can we execute?
Got it.
The execution cannot be just doing it. Yeah.
Yep. Well, Bassem, thanks a lot for spending your afternoon and enjoy our talk with Vivian and I, and share how you feel, how you think, and what's your opinion about thinking. We really appreciate that, and there's a lot of people that we're benefiting from listening to this conversation, because we believe that the thinking is the beginning of the change. So if we can have the thinking right, then it will lead to the good changing process. And of course, it has to have a doing also. But this is the beginning of everything, good or bad, right? So if we think good, then we change into the good way. And so thank you for the insights that you share, for the generosity of meeting me and Vivian again. And I look forward to meeting you in Vietnam one day when you travel to this part of the world, okay?
Definitely. Thank you for your time. Thank you for thinking of me. I enjoyed it as much as hopefully the audience will enjoy it. I hope that I shared something that is useful to somebody, even if one person finds it useful, that was worth it. But more importantly, talking to you guys, you have a very nice way of running this discussion. You're both very smiley. It puts one at ease. And you've done a great job. I look at all the people that you've interviewed and the subject that you've covered. Keep doing it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful
Thanks.
day.
You
Happy
take care.
November to you.
All right. Thank you. Same to you. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you, Vivian.